I'd like to call to order the North Oakland Transportation Authority special meeting. Today is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. Wait.
This one is the minutes.
Oops. Today is Thursday, September 16th, 2021.
Okay.
Please, let's do the call to order. Done. Roll call.
Bill Dunn.
Here.
Mike McDonald. Here. Bruce Pearson. Absent. Ed Brakefield.
Here.
Margaret Payne.
Here.
Tanya Wabo. Absent. Maria Bergeau.
Here.
Ann Kelch. Absent. Joe Young here for Ken Van Florfee. Jerry Narsh. Absent. Roberta Habowski. Mike Flood. Here. Chris Barnett. Absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, let's pay respect to the flag.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Mark.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to the minutes of September 2nd, 2021.
August 19th also.
And the 2nd and the 19th.
Do we have to do them in two separate motions?
No.
I move to approve the minutes from August 19th and September 2nd, 2021 for the NODA.
Support flood.
Moved and supported. Any other questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. On to the director's report.
Yes, good afternoon. Our rides through August total 22,503, which is up 28% from last year. Based on our numbers, our average miles per ride are going up a little bit to over 14 miles a trip. We did receive our 2 Ram ProMaster vehicles this week, and we're in the process of getting them ready for the road. They look great, and they have room for 2 wheelchairs. I think it would be a nice addition to our fleet to have they have a little more room for some of our larger wheelchairs that we struggle with the transit, so that would be good. Attorney Mark Horner from Foster Swift is here tonight to discuss becoming an Act 196 authority. He is the attorney for WODA, who just completed the process. WODA did almost complete the process back in 2016, but it would be good to discuss questions and concerns with him. The Michigan Public Transit Conference was really helpful, meeting MDOT personnel and vendors and seeing some of the presentations on the future of transportation was informative. Electric vehicles are definitely on the rise, and there's a lot of funding available for them. However, the range in miles for the charge currently is only 80 to 100 miles right now. So hopefully that technology will improve so we can possibly use them as our minimum daily miles are over 150. We met with FirstNet yesterday. It's a first responder phone company through AT&T, and I know a lot of the local fire stations and police departments use FirstNet. They kind of prioritize their system over other systems, and so NODA would qualify for that, being in transportation. So we're discussing moving over our two-way phones to them, and they're putting together the pricing. It currently looks like all new phones would be like 99 cents for a 2-year contract, so it looks like it might be a good thing. We're going to get a couple new ones, or a couple of them to try to see how they work. The check signing issue again is on the agenda this month. I think I just put a refresher there. What we went over last month relating to who the board chooses to sign the checks. On TV, the community promo video of NODA and interview me, which came out last week, which is always good to have free publicity. And we're still working on our employee reviews. We should have them wrapped up by next month. And our generator bid was awarded to Triple R Electric from Lake Orion. They're the lowest bid, and this is going to be paid through a grant. And then we also did receive the official award from SMART that we will get $438,000 in operating dollars through 5310 money and 8 vehicles. Our next board meeting is October 21st. Thank you.
Any questions?
But move to receive plat.
Second.
Moved, seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Public comments? No public comments. Would there be a motion to receive and file the financial activity?
So moved.
report? You moved? Seconded? Catch that, Joe?
Yes.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Would there be a motion to pay the bills in a total of $115,576.86?
I move to approve the bills in the amount of $115,576.86.
Support, Flood.
Moved and supported. Any questions? Concerns? Roll call?
Dunn.
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Wakefield.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Boudreaux.
Yes.
Young, yes. Flood.
Yes.
And moving on to old business. The Act 196 discussion, we have Mark here from Foster Swift. I'll turn it over to him.
Sure. So my name is Mark Kerner. I'm an attorney with Foster Swift, Collins, Smith, and Lansing. Just briefly, I've been practicing since 2000. Have a law license since 2009. I've been working with transit agencies. I'm currently general counsel to 17 transit agencies throughout the state, which means that I work with them on contracts, issues with the FTA, MDOT, labor and employment issues, pretty much anything that comes before them, but I've been doing that since about 2009. I guess there was some question you folks, I think, that thought about, you're currently in Act 51 authority under the Urban Cooperation Act, which allows townships and other municipalities to get involved in an interlocal agreement to provide transportation services or other governmental services. Act 196 is a different public transit entity act, which allows for an entity that's formed under the Urban Cooperation Act to transfer itself into an Act 196 authority if it so chooses. Some of the differences are, it currently is an Act 51 authority. You're not allowed to issue your own millage. You want to have millage that supports the transit agency, then you're required to do that in each of your individual townships. Under Act 196, one of the powers of an Act 196 authority is the ability to authorize levy and millage in the service areas. So if you converted to an Act 196 authority upon approval of your board, you could then issue a millage for all of the townships at once, the entire service area of the authority, rather than doing it in the individual locations if you desired to do so. Really, there's not an Act 196 authority is its own separate entity that has the right to sue and be sued. So that takes away some of the potential threat of the individual entities that make up 196 authority. However, the way that you can set it up is that you still have each of the different governmental entities appointing board members of the authority serving on the board just as you do now. So a lot of the things that you do now wouldn't be different if you were an Act 196 authority. You have a different legislative empowering statute behind you, and a few more rights and abilities that you don't have under the current statute. So I understood that there was some discussion of this recently with folks, and are there questions that I can answer specifically about, well, I can tell you what the process is, but if there are specific questions about the 196, I'd be happy to answer.
You know, aside from the ability to put out your own millage, could you give us quickly the pros and cons of joining as a 196 authority?
Well, right now you are, I believe, a subrecipient of SMART. So you receive a lot of the funds that you get from the state and federal government from SMART. An Act 196 authority has the ability to get the funds directly from MDOT and not go through SMART as a subrecipient. So there's more grants become available because you're not in the subrecipient pot of SMART. As the Act 196 authority is its own, your current articles of incorporation didn't indicate whether or not you were a separate public corporation, but an Act 196 authority is specifically with the ability to sue and be sued. So, for instance, if there is an injury on a bus and someone sued one of the individual townships for the injury that occurred on that bus, you're even more insulated from liability, as it's not the township that's operating the bus, it's the Act 196 authority that's operating the bus itself. So there's that benefit. As an Act 196 authority, you would have the opportunity to issue bonds, notes and bonds. You can issue tax anticipation notes to secure financing before you receive funds from villages. So that's a benefit as well. From a con standpoint, I don't know that you have the ability in creating the 196 authority to still hide. Back up a little bit. The process is that the Act 51 authority has to amend its articles of incorporation to be formed under Act 196. So before that can happen, a 2/3 vote of your board has to approve what the new articles of incorporation are. And what we did in WODA is we took the existing interlocal agreement and we incorporated all of the controls and everything else that we had in that agreement essentially into the Act 196 agreement. So your individual governmental agencies would still potentially have the ability to appoint board members of the Act 196 authority. Those board members would serve at the pleasure of those different governing agencies. Because of a concern about millage issues, we placed a provision in the WODA amended agreement that says that you can't issue a millage through the full area unless you have a unanimous vote of the board of directors. That way, if a certain township or village doesn't want to participate or doesn't think it's a good idea, that could be a stopgap. That may not necessarily be what you folks would want to do. But once you've adopted those, each of the member communities have to adopt those amended articles of incorporation. So you'd have to take them back to each of your governing bodies that would have to say, yes, we agree with them as well. Then your NODA board would also have to adopt them. And once that happens, those articles of incorporation are filed with the Michigan Department of Transportation and with Oakland County. And if they've been filed with Oakland County, and they're also published in a local paper, and if they've been published and filed within 60 days and there isn't objection by the community, then you become a 196 authority.
Would this authority have to get insurance to cover liability type issues, or?
Insurance is with respect to vehicles, so that
To cover your ass in case you get sued.
well, yeah, I mean, if you currently, I'm sure you currently have insurance for the vehicles that you have. So that you would probably just transfer that insurance to the new entity name, which the entity name wouldn't even change. So it would still be NODA, it's just the North Oakland Transportation Authority. It's just that you'd be formed under a different.
You know, I'm not going to try to hoard all the questions here, but would this authority be able to contract with other communities, or would we have to bring in the community as a full member, or?
You can do both. There are provisions in Act 196 that provide how new community members become a member of the authority, and that's through agreement by the board. But there isn't anything that would prohibit you from saying, well, they don't want to become a full member, but they do want us to provide particular services, so we're going to enter into a third-party agreement with that community to provide those services.
Our thought is, you know, we don't want to get in a situation where we bring someone that's going to be able to outvote all the rest of us, because, you know, we have our unique system out here, and if we allow someone to come in, we may want to contract with someone rather than have them come in as a full-fledged member.
And you absolutely can do that, because the board of an Act 196 authority has to vote to allow a party to join. And one of the things I did want to mention that's different, I did go through some of your articles of incorporation. One of the things that's different is that Act 196 has specific ways that you can get out of being the authority, and it's different than what you currently have. I think you can withdraw within 90 days of any fiscal year. It's not quite the same with the 196 authority, it's a little bit different. And there are some obligations, so if the 196 authority had had a millage in effect and you withdrew as a community, your community would still have to pay the millage until that millage levy expired. But you'd still be able to receive services from the authority until that millage expired as well. So just a few things.
I'd just like to add on to what Bill said. We've put in many years here to build this up, and it's been our taxpayers and our manager and the several townships here, and we just don't want to give away the vote to, if we bring in another community and all of a sudden, you know, like we say, we bring in a huge couple townships close to us have a high population, all of a sudden they have the majority. And so you're saying that we can maintain control and then just contract. And as far as millages are concerned, you're saying that if we could do it like they did on the west side, where they said that it was unanimous
Yep.
as a vote. Can you tell me, how do the members get elected on the board? Is it just a township sends representatives?
Yep, your township, each individual township would elect its representatives on the board of directors, and that representative would serve at the pleasure of the township board. So if the township board determined that somebody else needed to serve, they could remove that director from the board of
And it
directors.
would still be like, we could set it up the same way where it was unanimous for a millage increase.
Correct.
And then we're allowed to go 5 mills?
5 mills is the max under Act 196, yeah. And it's subject to once you do a mill, it's subject to all the same rollbacks and everything else that you're currently doing with.
I have one more question.
Sure.
What's your take on the RTA? And do you think that that is going to be a player in this for us?
I will tell you that one of the reasons that WODA made the decision, originally WODA incorporated as an Act 51 agency because they wanted the communities to see how well they could make this work. And then once it got going a little longer, they thought that they would then talk to their individual communities about becoming an Act 196. Because of the concern about RTA coming in and taking a bigger piece of the pot, they thought that becoming a 196 will give them a bigger voice at the table. At the end of the day, instead of just being a subrecipient of SMART and being a direct recipient from MDOT, its own 196 authority, they felt that it would give them a bigger voice, so they made that decision quicker.
And I have one more, I don't mean
No,
to
there's no
hog it.
do-over.
And I have one more. If we do contract with other big cities and townships around us that use SMART, how does that rub them? Is there a problem with us taking over? I mean, say like Auburn Hills is interested, and they're covered, say, by SMART or whatever. How does that rub SMART? Will they get upset at us because we are now more efficient in taking over areas?
We're
Or
saving the money too.
Well, I guess I don't know what's the agency that currently provides transportation in Auburn Hills?
I think it's SMART.
Smart directly.
Yes.
They came to us because they were unhappy with.
I mean, I don't want to get in a war with SMART if they're much larger.
Sure.
But we're much more efficient and technically a better service, I believe. And if we and other communities definitely want to join ours because ours is run so well, but I don't want to get in a tit for tat with them.
Sure. Well, and I will tell you that normally as attorneys we talk around answers we don't necessarily know the answer to, and I think that it's one of those things that you probably have to, you be careful with your relationship with SMART because you're still going to have involvement with SMART over time. But having said that, there's nothing that prevents you from entering into an agreement with any city, village, or township that you want to provide transportation services for on a contractual basis. And just to address the other issue about keeping control in the vote, the way that you currently have it set up, I think, is that each of the township members of your board have 2 votes and the villages have 1. And that's just based upon township and villages. It's not because of the size of the township or anything else. Or is it? Maybe I didn't see that. Well, if it's based on the size, then that'll be different. But you could set it up so that each of the townships, regardless of size, have the same vote. So you could keep control that way too. It all depends on how you want to style the articles of incorporation to run the board. I mean, that's up to you. You folks really need to decide on it. We go through and talk about all the different options that you can have in the articles, and then you folks decide on what you like best and don't like best, and then you adopt them. So,
Anybody else have questions? Because I have one more too. Go ahead.
Speaking from the village point of view, I represent a village. As you read, we're currently included, our basic contribution is to convert or transfer our SMART credits to NODA. And that's really the only requirement we have because as village residents, we are also township residents. Is there any reason why we shouldn't or shouldn't have a seat on the board when it's created? I mean, as it is, each community happens to have one village in it. Each township, I should say, has one village in it. So that would be an important question for, I think, all of us.
If there's any reason for you not to be on the board?
Right.
To me, any member community, if you all agree, would have a seat on the board based and have voting rights based upon what you agreed on. It's the same thing that you have now.
I put it in, I put it, we put it right in
No.
the
No.
articles of
No.
incorporation.
I don't have a problem, I stay the same.
Yeah, no, I guess that's what I'm trying to.
We could just write it that way, right?
Yeah, there's no reason to, if you folks have a wheel that's working, there's no reason to fix it. If, much of what we did with WODA was we took the existing interlocal agreement terms and conditions and said, these are our Act 196 articles of incorporation, this is what we're going to do. There are certain requirements that you have to add from Act 196, but it was minimal, and we kept everything else, the voting status, everything else we kept the same in the agreement, so.
Go ahead, Margie.
Now, did you say that we need 2/3 vote from each of the boards
Yes.
to get this to go into effect? Okay,
Yes.
and then the other question I have is, do you know how many Act 196 entities we have in the state of Michigan?
How many we have? I don't know specific, I actually have a form that tells me how many of them from MDOT, but I represent.
Is it a fair number?
It's a fair number.
Okay.
And I can give you an example. Roscommon County Transportation is a dollarized system that is an Act 196 authority. The Ludington Mass Transportation Authority is an Act 196 authority. It's also dial-right.
Okay.
Bay Area Transportation Authority is also an Act 196 authority.
All right.
The Clinton Area Transportation
I
Authority.
just don't want to be the new guy.
No, and the reason I know that those specifically, like I said, I have a list of which each of them are through MDOT, but I represent all of those.
That's
so
fine.
I
This
can
is just
probably rattle off a
what
few
we know.
others, but there's
It's
quite a few.
not a new thing.
It's not a new thing at all.
Okay. Yeah, that's my question.
Go ahead, Margie.
Is there something in the 196 that, let's say you do allow a township on and you say you're not on the board, where they can force it or appeal it?
If you allow a township on and they're not on
If
the
we're
board,
in the coverage but not on the board, say we take on Auburn Hills, is there some sort of process in the 196 that allows them
to force themselves to become a member, I don't believe so. I think the process has got to be, and I'll double check, but to add, you would need to have, I think, a vote of the existing board. So somebody, the village wants to, or township wants to come in, they would have to first adopt a resolution by 2/3 of their board saying they want to become a member of the authority, and then present that to you, and you'd have to have a resolution adopted by 2/3 of your existing board to approve that entity as becoming a member. If you don't have that vote, they can't join the authority.
Well, let me ask you this, can we revamp that and say it has to be a majority? I mean, that it has to be unanimous?
I believe, I don't see any reason why we couldn't do that in your article of incorporation. Just right now, the law says that for them to join, it has to be by 2/3. And I'd have to double check, because I don't know that anybody has a unanimous vote to allow folks in. But I can double check that for you folks and let you know.
Mark, say we decide to do this. Would you suggest we go to each township to get their okay? Because I don't want to spend any money and have the township boards go, I don't want anything to do with this. Would you suggest we take it to each board, get a confirmation from them and bring it back, and then go to step 2, which would be changing articles of incorporation? Rather than reinvent the wheel, you seem like you've done this before. Could you give us a price on, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be exact. It's gonna be $1,000, $10,000?
Well, that really depends on the whole process. So as an example with WODA, each of the different, before we originally started, each of the communities, I think, were provided with information about forming this interlocal agreement, but then each of the communities had their own attorneys that sat down at a table and negotiated the articles of incorporation. You're already a formed entity, so You wouldn't necessarily have to have, you as NODA wouldn't have to pay multiple attorneys to go through the articles of incorporation. But it's likely that each of the townships and villages may have their own corporate counsel.
They may want to adopt whatever, say you present to us.
Yes, like I would, so depending how it worked, I would act, if you hired me to do so, I would act as NODA's attorney to prepare that documentation. And then each of you board members would then take that documentation to your respective townships or villages for approval at that level. But I wouldn't be doing that. I could provide information, but each of your townships are represented by council, and then you would have their council that would approve that. But the first part of your question, I would suggest that you provide information to each of the governing bodies that are involved in NODA to see if there is an interest. Because if you don't get approval by 2/3 of boards that are currently part of this, then it doesn't make any sense to spend the money on amending the articles of incorporation or taking any of those other steps.
So what approximately would the boards cost to incorporate and change? 5,000, 10,000?
Other than filing fees, I mean, are there any?
There aren't filing fees, it's really just attorney fees. It's the time that you spend with your attorney to get the completed. I will tell you that my current hourly rate is $215. We charge more for lots of things, but for municipalities, we try to keep it low. And then it just depends on how long it takes to get the documents prepared and agreed upon. I would guess at least 5,000, but
Yeah, that's close enough.
yeah, just I would
As long as
guess.
you don't say 5 and then give us a bill at the end of 20.
No, well, and then again, that's all a function of you folks. If you folks say we want to do it at 5, but then we come to 17 meetings that last 2 hours a time,
I understand.
the cost is shooting up through the roof.
I just have one more question. I'm for it in the sense that as long as there's a checks and balance where it's a unanimous for increases in the millage. But if NODA, if the RTA, they're allowed to go up 5 mils. And that's the only thing that frightens me. If they go up 5 mils and we add another mill or whatever, somewhere at 6 mils. So we can't get out of the RTA. We're always going to be still paying them even though we have our own millage.
I hope not.
No, and I'm not positive on that. I would think, no, you wouldn't.
We could be out of them
I
altogether.
think that's the part of the idea, but I need to double check that.
We opt out, please.
If we could be out of them and then we have control over our own millage, and I believe that as a township would be happy with that. I just don't want to find out that we're trying to maintain our transportation system and they have a high millage rate that we don't even get to take advantage of, and we're just at their mercy at 5 mils. And then I think that WODA had a maximum of 5 mils also.
Yeah, under Act 196, you have a maximum
So
of 5.
there's a maximum of 10 mils.
It could be out there. Yeah, if RTA was allowed to do it over top of the millage that the 196 was able to do, I'll have to check that. We'll give that information.
It's kind of important. Mike?
What kind of time frame did it take for you with WODA to go through this process?
So the process of getting WODA formed took a long time. The process of moving from a 196 took about 2 months.
About 2 months?
Yeah, and then part of that is because part of the a new member that came aboard in the end had some issues with how to get out of the agreement, so things had to be changed, but about 2 months. And the reason 2 months is merely because we needed to have time for the boards to be provided with the new amended articles, and for those governing folks to get approval. Once we got approval, then we got approved at the board level, but it doesn't take long to prepare the documentation. And then, of course, you have to have, it has to be published for 60 days before in the paper, plus with the Department of Transportation and with Oakland County before it'll become effective, because it gives citizens a right to object to it.
Margie?
I didn't have any questions.
Okay, hear that?
Regarding the village and the overlapping government with townships, the villages are paying township millage, which is then paid to support NODA. So all of us are all paying, we're paying at different rates because because of each jurisdiction and their taxable value and rollback's different. And there's also an issue with they're not all in the same year. One is off sync.
Yeah.
I know you could have a vote to put them all in the same, obviously, and one of them obviously would be 1 year less at the end of the new program. So that's another little nuance we wanted to be aware of. So really, the smart credits they get is a bonus that we're getting. And now smart, do they provide dial-a-ride like we do? They don't do door-to-door.
They do have a connector service.
But do they do door-to-door like we do?
They do. They have a smaller service called the connector bus. It is kind of a
And then,
paratransit.
what was the other thing? I mean, in one way, being part of SMART, they write all the grants for us, right?
No.
They're the designated recipient for the Metro Detroit area. So currently, when I apply for grants, I have to go through them.
Right.
In order for, and they're the ones that are actually applying even on
Right.
behalf of us.
Right.
But currently, we're also part of we're urban and non-urban.
Right.
So the non-urban, I go right to MDOT on our own.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of set that way, and I can deal with that, but the payments still flow through SMART just
Right.
because they're the designated
Right.
recipients, so they're the ones that have to.
I'm just wondering if SMART would be more successful in getting grants than if we were on our own or not, because of size and magnitude and resources they have available. Just a question.
They're not writing, Smart's not writing the grants, she's writing the grants. We're just using Smart.
Getting them funded and approved, though.
Yeah, well, what you'd be doing instead of writing the grants to run through SMART, you
Right.
write the grants directly to MDOT. So MDOT is the recipient of TA funds, and then those funds come direct.
Well, I'm just, wondering if other people pick up on this smart
Yeah.
service is not always something to be desired according to the other county next to us too. They're not happy with it. I'm just wondering if smart will start dwindling down, other people will be picking up on the same idea. Macomb County has one.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. So if we were to make a contract with another neighboring city and not include them in the authority, is there a way to collect tax dollars? They would have to be part of the authority in order to levy tax?
You wouldn't be, if you were a 196 authority, you would not be able to levy a tax within their area unless they were a member.
Right.
Now, if they had their own funding, their own tax millage, they can pledge that funding to you
Got it.
as part of the agreement. And you
Okay.
put that in the agreement, so
All right.
you can enforce it that way.
So we could still contract with service to another community, but they wouldn't have a vote.
If
It's
that's what you chose to
subcontracted
do it,
service.
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the only other question, to just put it on the table, right now, the government, each entity, not only taxes all their business property owners, we also make a $200 and some odd thousand contribution as well. Is that in any way impacted or prohibited or special provision to do that?
With WODA, we maintain the funding mechanism from the different townships within.
They do the same thing?
196. They do.
They both?
But the idea being that, hoping that they would get more revenue from being in Act 196 so that they could reduce or eliminate the contribution formula that they use based upon ridership and location and that sort of thing.
Oh, good to hear that. That's what I was
Well,
hoping to think, that if our tax revenues come in, our other general tax, rather tax could go down, because that was the plan when we approved the millage, was that we were gonna reduce it based on the grant monies we got, which are any monies really. So as long as we keep that in mind, that the option is still available.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Any other questions?
Yeah, does this change our service now? Do we have to change anything to?
No. Your service will stay the same, your service area will stay the same, so it doesn't change any of that.
Hi, Mark.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Very much.
Board, where do you want to go from here? Do you want to go back to each community, your own communities, and
I do, but we have to have something to tell, have a good way of explaining it.
I would suggest that we look toward our manager that might want to come to our meeting and explain it.
Oh,
Sure.
Lynn, yeah, so
Yeah.
6 meetings you have.
Yep.
But I promise if,
Explain it.
well, I can't, I'm not the supervisor anymore. I
All right.
can't promise anything.
Right.
You can give us a fact sheet.
Yeah, I might work with you to come up with a good fact sheet to share with
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
If
Pretty
it's coming
nice
from
to have
you,
a
it's
good
gonna
fact
sound
sheet,
better
sure.
than coming
Yeah.
from me, so, yeah.
And short is best with the board.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Sure,
short
sure,
is
points
best.
of,
And
yeah.
if,
20 pages.
And,
If you've got more than one page,
and make sure you
You
bring
want- you
donuts.
want-
Yeah,
okay?
donuts
Right.
required, Lynn.
Donuts, yeah.
At the risk of being premature, Mark is willing to work with Lynn, at least in this instant moment on that, and then, but we will have to look for an attorney, I mean, in order to go through this. Correct.
Yeah,
We can hire Mark.
But,
Well, but we have to make that decision. That's where I'm
is
going.
this something we have to put out to bid, or is this something we can just make a decision and say,
Just make a
I
decision.
move to hire Mark, I don't know how you say your last name.
Kerner.
Kerner from Foster Swift
I think we could just do it.
at the rate of
$250.
$215 an hour to work on the Act 196. That was the
I
motion.
think that-
With a not to exceed figure.
With a not to exceed $10,000.
I've got a question.
That was my motion.
Well,
If
there's
we
a
went to
motion.
Mark, we were not reinventing the wheel. Mark has done this many times. So you could use a boilerplate for what you've done in the past, couldn't you, to save
I
some?
do, and frankly, what I use, would use or start with is your interlocal agreement.
Right,
So
okay.
that has all the provisions that you've all already agreed to regarding how you want this organization to be governed. That's the boilerplate language you start with.
Okay, and I didn't know you were making a motion, I
Yeah.
apologize in that.
So you have a.
Support.
And we have support, so.
Could you redo that motion?
Yeah.
I move to hire Mark Kerner at the rate of $215 an hour to work on the Act 196 for NODA with an amount not to exceed $10,000.
That was the support.
How do you feel about that?
I think
You want to listen?
I'd like to hire him to come up with the bullet points.
For the preliminary.
For the
Well,
preliminary.
within the, and then decide.
Yeah.
Well, if we hire him and we only take it to the point of bullet points, then he's going to charge us just whatever that took.
Oh, you smooth talk.
I mean, he's going to do what we ask him to do if we hire him.
Let's ask him, does that sound?
I don't operate under a retainer, so if you hire me, you pay for the time that I put in. So if you call me and ask me to do something, you get charged for that call, but I don't sit around and do things when you don't give me instructions to do things, so there's no retainer that you'd have to pay on a monthly basis.
You said it was 5,000 for what?
I gave an estimate that that's what it
That's
was.
what I mean, so I guess I'm wondering why we're using 10.
Well, I'm just very familiar with some of our townships in the area. I'm just saying.
I would,
Would you revise your motion to make it 5 and then
We can always.
we can then
Add
readdress
more.
it later?
Okay, I have to rescind my motion.
I rescind my second.
Okay, I make a motion to hire Mark Kerner from Foster Swift to prepare documentation for Act 196 for NODA, an amount for $215 an hour and not to exceed $5,000.
Support.
Who moved and supported? Roll call?
I just have one thing, could you just get back with us on the, if we do this, that we're not subject to the RTA millage? I'd like to know that.
Sure.
I don't think anybody knows that.
I think you're right.
I don't think that's a done deal yet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the status of the RTA, but I'll look into it to see what I can find out.
But I mean, between WODA and us, now all of a sudden we would have power. But now we're the whole north end of Oakland County.
The thing that concerns me the most is the board sitting here today has a very definite idea of what we want, what we'd like to accomplish. I'm concerned what happens in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years from now, when we're not here and the next board is here and they don't have our vision for this place. We're never going to, I don't see NODA ever levying 5 mills, on its own. I just don't see it.
Not as long as we continue our mission to
Right.
serve seniors, disabled, et cetera.
Correct.
Well, the voters would have to prove it every 5 years,
Correct.
Yeah,
regardless.
yeah.
Time with police and fire.
How long can you put a millage out for? Is it 5 years?
It's 5 years,
Five
yes,
okay.
5 years.
Any other questions? Did we vote on this
Not
yet?
yet.
Not yet.
Roll call.
Dunn,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Wakefield.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Bourgeois.
Yes.
Flood.
Yes.
And Young, yes.
Mark, you're ready to go home?
I'm ready. If you'd like me to, I will.
Was it a long drive?
About an hour and 25 minutes.
Oh, you going, where are you going?
Lansing.
Yeah, back to East Lansing area, so.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Spartan, eh?
I am a Spartan. I was gonna bring my Spartan
Oh,
face
well,
mask.
that's-
I
You're
thought,
looking
oh,
better and
kind
better
of-
now.
Revisit your vote.
I got tickets for the Michigan State game, so I'm happy.
Our attorney is a trustee on the MSU board.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you don't need me for anything else, I'll pack up and say thank you, folks. I'll send you an engagement letter based upon your motion, and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Mark.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank
Thank you very much. You answered a lot of good questions.
How does this three village goes around if the rest of the village doesn't
Take home.
Does the village have to be part of the 2/3? I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah, our one vote.
Yeah, I thought he
You're-
said
you're
each
on
individual
vote, yeah.
board,
All right, just
so.
wanted to double check if that's handled through the township.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Well, I guess we can just make that decision and say, we all feel that way, you
I've
know.
been
that-
talking about it in the village meetings the last couple of
Oh,
months,
okay, well,
so
that's
kind of
good.
alerting them. to it.
Oh, well, that's good. We've been remiss, we haven't said anything to our board.
Yes.
This is on our current village and the circumstances around it, but Joe, I know we talked about whether or not the townships would continue to contribute, but I never knew, or it was never at least discussed where I was familiar or present, that it would be eventually reduce the township involvement. I mean, we all know
It was
that.
based on grants. If we get more grants, we would only levy what we needed to operate with. That's what it's presented as.
Excuse me, Ben.
So it's only if we get other revenues.
So don't leave your friend.
Okay, that's not in writing anywhere, or it's not.
I think it was promoted that way.
Well, and that's my point, is that I don't think officially.
I mean, we shouldn't be levying more than we need to operate to begin with.
Exactly.
But I didn't see that in the village language.
No, it definitely wasn't.
Right.
So, and that, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
So maybe we need to be looking at our fund balance and making a decision about whether we should be levying less money.
Definitely
I
should be
defer-
always looking.
I defer to the director and the chair on that one.
Well, but the director is not on our township or village boards. You know, I mean, we're financially responsible to our
When she
residents.
comes back, we'll direct her to notify us of the.
Is this-
Sit down, Lynn.
Bill got you another job.
All right, what are we doing?
There, Joe brought up the idea that if NODA is not requiring all the money that we're trying to collect, could you tell us, every year what our financial situation is? I mean, are we gonna be in a position to maybe lower the percent for the taxes?
This sprung out of Joe's point.
Yeah.
About that we hoped at some point when we had enough, Joe says, grant funding, that we could reduce the township's contribution. I raised the point because I don't recall that we ever made that, it was a selling point, but not a, there was no board action or any motion to that effect. So I guess if we got to this point because now we're talking about it.
Mhm.
Whether there's an answer today or not, I don't know. But apparently, some communities would like to know if the grant ratio has changed.
It has not increased, I'll just tell you that, and I don't know, the problem is with grants, it's so, I would hate to say it's a five-year millage and to keep and bank on something that we're not sure about, like, so, like, last year, we were hoping we were gonna get another 150,000 that didn't come through, so, it's not, it's just,
That's
it's
exactly
hard
what we
to
didn't know.
bank on it, to
Very
be honest.
But I guess I would just ask this, if we purchased this building with our fund balance money, pretty
Right,
much.
right.
And so we didn't have to raise any rates to anybody. So, of course, we haven't been charging anything for the ridership or anything, but if we, I guess I would look at it from year to year. If we have a year where we have, maybe we set a dollar amount, but when we have a certain amount of excess in our fund balance, that we say, okay, townships and villages, you could reduce your contribution this year by such and such a
Quarter of a
percent.
mil or.
Yeah,
Wow.
such
Or not
and
just
such.
the village, but you're saying the government contributions versus.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes.
so-
Because technically it hits the residents that way
Exactly,
anyway,
exactly.
one way or the
I
other.
was actually hoping like for the village, looking at the budget, because of Headley going back, and we've been 5-year terms of rolling back, where really our rate is like at .23, so
Uh-huh.
I feel like we should go back to .25 if we do this authority and start,
Right.
Because
Right.
it's like $70,000 that,
So you're gonna ask for a tax increase?
that's basically,
Well,
but
they
it's
call it
basically-
that, but we just, it's a
the same-
restoration.
It's a
back to the
restoration,
original.
so I feel like if we do that, then we have a better chance of potentially not.
I was gonna ask
Right.
you, do you have to annually adjust your budget for the Headley rollback?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
So, I mean, so there's the downside on
Right,
it.
it is.
Right, right.
But
right.
on the other hand, your property values are going up. I mean, the whole thing of the
And-
matter is that we have a fiduciary responsibility to the people that we represent.
Right.
And if we have $1 million fund balance that we don't have any plans for, it's not fair to the property owners to charge them the $200,000 if we're just building up, because that's not our responsibility.
Well,
Physically, it's all something we need to look at every budget year, which we do.
Mhm.
So I'm just saying we need to look at that.
Sure.
But we shouldn't levy taxes because it's there. We should look at the overall financial position, if there's other services we should be doing or something else with that money, not just build, that's not what they want us to do, is build up fund balance. Beyond a
But
100%.
But conversely, if we don't have that money in the bank and we have a downturn like we had in 2008.
No, you keep the reserve.
And frankly, $1 million for an operation like this,
It's
all
not a
things
lot.
considered, is not.
Not a lot.
I don't, it's a lot, but it's not gonna keep it going for more
You
than
have to look
years.
at the cost of your vehicle, and that will tell you that $1 million is not a lot. The cost of the vehicles alone, how many vehicles can you buy for $1 million?
And I'm looking at your parking lot, it needs some attention.
Yeah.
There's definitely.
We need some capital improvement money.
Right, and there's things like, we don't offer health insurance to our full-time employees, and there was one that actually had to go to the hospital, he's on insurance, and it's like, and he's been with us for years, and I feel bad, you know what I mean? I'm like, there's things that maybe we should reflect, but I really, when you look at the cost annually, we may have some fund balance, but it's hard to find room for it
Right,
each year, or
going forward.
going forward. So it's just one of those things that I think we need to probably weigh a few things, concern me,
To be looked at.
yeah,
Now that we got this new building,
right.
we're looking at doing capital improvements and things, we're gonna start looking at that too.
Well.
Now that we've got this to maintain.
Right. And, yeah, this one's in pretty good shape.
Set aside the money for that.
So we're not paying the rent anymore, see?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And we're getting.
We can
we're
always
getting rental
increase the
income.
rent.
There you go, Bill.
But the parking lot definitely is gonna need some serious
That
work.
needs to
That's-
be
I mean, we've been,
addressed.
like, put little bits
Yeah.
here and there, but it's
Well,
bad.
And it's not good for the vehicle.
No.
So.
And your vehicle's all part of your capital improvement
Right.
project.
Should we move on?
Yes, please.
Yes.
To check, your turn. In the director's report, there's some information on check signing. Can you give us a quick overview of that? What is-
Right, I'd ask you, our official attorney, whether it would be okay to get a signature stamp for the board members, just to sign up that they basically said that isn't a good idea. They said you could have me be this check signer and then have the board approve it. And that would be fine, but I guess you can't do it the other way because you have to, the other idea is like if you did it ahead of time, because the Open Meetings Act, you have to have it, you have to debate the bills in public if we're going to do it that way. So you could have me elect to do it or not, keep it the same way.
So we could elect for you to do it.
Right.
You present the bills after the fact, and we can approve them then? Is that what you're saying?
I could do it either way. I could present the bills before,
Before she-
and just before I sign it, say these are the bills to
What
be
about the
approved.
bills that come late?
They said you
She
could-
submits it to the board after that, but the normal
Right.
procedure is
Right.
you get it approved first.
Right.
Then you write the checks and sign them.
Yeah.
If there's an emergency or something, you can make accommodation for it. And you
Right.
can have a rubber stamp, because it could be printed when you write the checks.
Right, right.
I just make a motion that Bill can't go on vacation anymore, you just have to be.
Yeah. For those of us that are retired.
Excuse me, but I think
None of this,
retirement.
none of this Florida crap.
No more fishing.
Well, could we put that on the next agenda, the authorization? for
Sure.
signature? So they have in writing.
The bill can't go anywhere.
I won't be here for the next 3 weeks, so tell Susan.
I won't either.
Yes, Mike?
I'm just gonna weigh in. I really think that the public trust is in the elected officials that are sitting here. And I really am not sure how well received it would be to internalize this process, basically because we need a check sign at odd moments. And that's just my opinion. I think the current system is, it's not broken, it's just the human element that is, creating the problem.
Well, one option would be to add Lynn as a check signer. We need 2 signers in it.
Yes.
We could add her.
Oh, that's
That would
true.
just be one board member. You okay with that?
Yeah, if Lynn's okay with that, that would certainly improve the odds.
Right, yeah, that's true.
Can we say that? I was wrestling with my phone here.
We suggested that we add Lynn as a check signer.
So you still need 2. So I'd be one and still have another one, which that would
Or somebody else.
right?
Yeah, that way.
Just add, we would make a motion.
Who are you a
Add
check signer? Are
Lynn.
you a check signer?
Yeah.
Yes, so am I.
Right. So this is
So am I.
great.
Yes.
Bruce says.
So.
Yeah, I'm sure you're never here.
Guys, we
Following
don't-
your motion, add
You
Lynn
retired.
Gustafson as a check signer, if you want to do that, and then take care of the whole problem.
Yeah,
Can we do
that's
it by
true.
motion right now?
Yes, on the agenda.
So
Check
I'll make
signing
that
for
motion.
Rochelle. I'm sorry.
I'll make the motion that we add Lynn as a check signer.
Second.
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Let's do roll call.
Okay. Dunn,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Pearson.
Yes.
Wakefield.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Peugeot.
Yes.
Flood.
Yes.
Young, yes. All right.
There is no new business.
Well, wait, we didn't do the,
Formula?
the approval of the funding formula, did that change?
Yes,
Because of
it
the
changed
census, or?
because of the census. I
Oh.
put the 2020 census data, so the total doesn't change in the budget in total, but the spread between
Between the
communities
communities.
are slightly changed. And
I make a motion to approve the funding formula as presented.
I'll support that motion.
Moved and seconded.
What was it, can you just?
So we're
it
saying,
looks like this.
we're saying that we're gonna use the 2022,
2020 formula, or
the
census.
2020 census
Correct.
Yes.
numbers, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I had this 2010 census numbers
Okay,
last.
what page is that, just so I can see what,
Looks like this.
which,
Hey, Lynn, what page are you on?
It
The
is-
funding
it
formula?
looks like this one,
Yep.
the funding formula.
Okay.
It's right after
What page is
the,
from the back?
it's right after the bills, right after the bills.
Yeah, everybody should be going up in population.
no, we went down.
Did you go down there?
We went down 200.
Did you?
The village went down too.
So what did that, can you just real quickly tell us what Addison did?
Addison, your ridership actually went up this year.
We'll make up for it.
So the ridership is fine. You went up $1,000. Last year, we were at 16,306, you're at 17,313. And Orion went down from 107,665 to 103,716, and Oxford went up 2,942 from 81,028 to 83,970.
And ours went up,
$1,000.
why? For
Ridership,
Ridership.
because it's 0.5% ridership, 0.5%.
Do you want a roll call or?
Do roll call.
Okay, Donnie?
Yes.
McDonald?
Yes.
Pearson?
Yes.
Wakefield?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Bordeaux?
Yes.
Flood?
Yes.
Young? Thank you. No new business.
Okay, now, no new business. Public comment. Seeing none. Is there a motion to receive and file the monthly rider?
So moved.
Mileage reports?
Who second?
Second.
Bruce?
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board member comment. We'll start with Joe.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Or,
Second.
Aye.
What a comment.
oh, Bill's got a
That's long
comment.
enough for a long time.
You always have a
What
comment.
do you guys say, Bill?
Right?
We're almost an hour over our.
Aye.
I was gonna say, this is 2 hours less than the Polly and Trail meeting.
Yeah.
This shouldn't count against my
No, you're
average
right.
time.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't know, you're 45 minutes over yet.
Are we okay?
Go to the next
We're
one.
adjourned?
We are adjourned.
Okay.